Alright guys, hello, welcome to ZooView. My name is Peter. I'm your host. I'm the educational coordinator here at the zoo, as well as one of the kind of general zookeepers. If this is your first time, welcome. If this is one of your many times, welcome back. Today's going to be a little different though. I know normally we talk about one specific animal, what they do in the wild, how we take care of them here at the zoo. My little friend here today, her name is Zula, and Zula is our African ball python. We're not focusing on her today, but we're going to be focusing on how to take care of her as well as other animals like her at your own home. So this is kind of like an exotic at-home pet care. So things you can have like small lizards, amphibians, snakes, things like that. Things that are legal. We're not talking about big things like bison or elk or lions and tigers that you can keep at your home. We're talking about things that you can actually get at a pet store or from a breeder. So we have a whole table lined up for a lot of information to go over with you guys. So the first thing we're going to go over is going to be, which we don't actually have, is going to be tank size. So the best thing to do is before we buy an animal is going to be looking over what that animal needs. How big will they get? A lot of times people will get a snake that looks like Zula and finds out that it's actually going to grow into a Burmese python because it is a Burmese python which can get up to 15 feet. So Zula here, this is a full-grown ball python. That's why they're really, really popular as a pet. They only get about 3 to 4 feet in length. So tank size. So tanks range from 10 gallons, which will be a foot long, to 55 gallons, which is about 3 feet long, all the way up to 125 gallons, which can be 6 feet long, 4 feet in depth, and about 4 feet tall. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what size tank you need. Now after you find the tank, next is going to be looking into the animal. Is your animal a desert animal, a tropical animal? Do they like more or less heat or humidity? So figure out what animal you want to get, and then that'll really dictate the rest of your kind of creating its home. So the first thing is going to be substrate here. And I have a whole bunch of different options. Things that are very easy to take care of and clean. Newspaper. It's not the most ideal for a peel by looking through a cage, but it's the easiest to clean up. You can get newspaper, just open it up, put it down. The print is safe for your animal to be on. Just like anything else, just pick it up, crumple it, and throw it away. So newspaper is the most easiest for anybody to take care of. Also the cheapest. Other things, there's mats that you can buy. So this one is a green color. They come in greens and different shades of browns. They have little textured things if you want a more rocky one. So these mats are really nice. You can put them in and take them out, wash them, hand wash them, scrub them, throw a hose on them. So a mat is a really nice, very simple way also. Not the most eye-appealing, but the most easiest to take care of. And then we have other types of substrates here. We have reptibark, which is really good for more drier animals. It's much more of almost a dry, almost pellet look in effect. So it doesn't clump up as easily as other things. So this will be a little harder to clean out some poop or pee of your different animals. If your animal comes from a really humid environment, the rainforest, something like that, you might need something like this, which is cypress mulch. Really high in humidity. It holds water very well. So something that needs a lot more humidity, something like that. A little bit more expensive to get as well. So it looks the best, most appealing, but can be expensive. And then what I like to kind of fill in a lot of these enclosures, especially a lot of these things here at the zoo, is Eco Earth. You can buy this at any pet store or online. This is composited cocoa fibers and other things like that. So it comes in this brick form, and a little bit goes a long way. So here's a little handful. You add water to it. Kind of what it looks like. Really high in moisture, holds moisture really, really well. So this is great for amphibians. All of our amphibians here at the zoo have this in it because you can mist it and it really holds that saturation, which is really, really good. Now this is only a few of the substrates. There's many other types of substrates out there depending on what you want to get. So like I said, always just do your research to figure out what's out there. So once you figure out what substrate you want, then you can start kind of putting things in it. And over here, we just have some small examples of different decor. You can have leaves, rocks, different sort of sticks and bark, things for them to climb on, little hides, depends on how big your animal is. You could put this down so they have a hide. This is actually Zula's snake hut, so it's just something where she could get in and get away from. So hides come in all different shapes and sizes. You can make your own. You want to give your animal somewhere to feel safe and secure at. Think about you. You love your bedroom. That's where you feel the most comfortable. That's where you go to bed at. Same thing for an animal. Make sure you give them a nice home. And know what type of animal you have. Is it an arboreal animal, which means climb trees? Does your stick need to be vertical so it can climb, or more horizontal? If you know that your animal comes from a more tropical area, you're going to want to have thicker, darker leaves on them rather than an animal that may come from a desert. So decor, like I said, do your research and figure out what your animal really likes and what's their natural habitat. And after that, the biggest thing that has the most variety is going to be food. So food comes in all different shapes and sizes, and I got a whole variety of things here. So our first one here is going to be our two over here, bird food. So this is Missouri grade parrot food. So this kind of is the high-end quality. It doesn't look the greatest, but has all the vitamins and minerals birds need. So we give it to our parrots right out back here. More of a commercial where you can buy in your pet store is something that looks like this. Has a lot of seeds, other sort of treats in there. This is definitely more favorite to smaller birds. So birds that are the finch size, things that eat seeds all the time. So make sure you do your research what your bird likes to eat. Those come in varieties of things. So those are for our birds. For our reptiles and amphibians, they could be omnivores, which means they eat both plants and meats. They can be carnivores, only meat. They can be herbivores, only greens, fruits, and veggies, or an insectivore, which means they only eat insects. So here on our table here, we have a wide variety of things. So we'll start with just our herbivores. Any sort of darker green, so spring mixes and up. We like to try to stay away from lettuces. They just have a lot of water to them and not a lot of other nutrients. But we like to give collard greens, mustard greens, kale, things like that, as well as different varieties of fruits, plums, nectarines, blueberries, any sort of fruit or veggie. So you want to do your research. Where does your animal come from? Are they herbivore? And what would they eat in the wild? Other things that are herbivores or that need food are tortoises. There are certain tortoise pellets we can give our food that has everything in it. Different sort of turtle food as well. Come in floating pellets, small ones. There's a variety of sticks that you can get. So there's a whole bunch of different things that you want to look into. Some of them are much more higher in protein, which is good for a lot of those turtles that need a lot more meat or protein in their diet. Back here, we have some of our meat things for our animals. So Zula here, she loves these frozen mice, so we'll thaw them out. So if you want a snake, your snake will eat a frozen mouse or a live mouse. We make our own meatballs here. So it's ground turkey with our meat supplement, which is a powder that you could buy, which has a lot of vitamins and minerals in it. So for our big lizards, they'll get a meatball because they're a carnivore. And then back here is just a variety of some of the insects we have here at the zoo for our insectivores. So those are animals that eat meat, but are just eat insects. So like our chameleon will eat horned worms, which are those nice big bright green ones. The superworms, which are the big longer kind of orangey brown banded ones. And in the corner we do have a couple of our waxworms. So things like our toads will like to eat this. Like I said, our chameleon will eat some of these. So depending on your animal, you will have to decide on what type of food you need. Are they an herbivore? What type of fruits or veggies would they eat in the wild? If they're a snake, what size mouse would you have to buy? Small, medium, large. You have to go bigger for a rat-sized animal. And then what type of insects you need. And a lot of times you can keep insects really easily. You can buy them at the pet store, keep them in a small container, give them some fruits as well, and you can keep your own insects in your house to feed your reptile or other exotic. So we have bedding, we have kind of decor, we have food. The next one is probably the most simplest. It's going to be water. And you can have a variety of dishes. A more flat one if your animal tends to stay more to the ground or is flat. We have a little taller dish if they're a bit taller. This is just a bird water dish that comes in and out pretty easily. So it snaps into place so they can't kind of mess around with it. And also you could winch it onto the wire at the end. So this is really good for birds because birds like to mess around with things. So just to think about water as well for your animal at home. And then over here, heating and lighting, which can get a little bit complicated. So there are a variety of light hoods. This is what we call hoods. They come in wired ones. They have these kind of metal ones. There's different sort of clamps you can add on to clamp on to your side of your enclosure. They have long kind of tube hoods with a switch at the end. This one has a switch here. So there's a whole bunch of variety of hoods. And depending on the size of the hood, will determine how much wattage can it take. And that's going to revolve around your light bulbs. So reptiles need heat. They're that cold-blooded animal I talked about in some of our other ZooViews, which means they need a warmer environment. A lot warmer than probably what that just container is. So you need to provide heat for them, and heat comes in a whole bunch of different ways. They come in red lights, there's daytime lights. One that I don't have here is a heat emitter, which doesn't produce an actual light, it just gives off heat. They come in different sizes. This is a 250 watt solar glow, which has a white light to it. This is a 100 watt red one, which is a little bit smaller. And if I get out my day one, see how small that is. So, comes in different sizes. And those wattages mean how far it can emit. And each one of these boxes, you can buy at any pet store, like I said, on the back. They'll have you a range of how far it is by how much the wavelength is, as well as, there it is, how many wattage is it, and how far you should have it away from your animal, which is a really good resource to know. Depending on how big your tank is, you might want to give some more heat, a more larger wattage to it, to make sure that that reptile or amphibian can stay warm. So they have a whole bunch of different ones. Like I said, they can come in long tubes as well. Now, besides for providing heat, your exotic animal will also need to have UV light, which is what we get from the sun. So we replicate that in lights as well. So there's UVA, UVB. They come in this kind of like what I just showed you in a tube. It comes in a... You could twist it in. They also have long tube ones, kind of like fish tank lights shape, which produce that UV. And a lot of times, these people don't realize that these need to get changed almost every 6 months. That UV power that's in it just isn't strong enough. So always try to keep a chart and switch out your UV lights. It may be on, but might not be doing as much as what you think besides just giving off some lighting in there. So when you do keep an animal, make sure that you have proper heating as well as your UV. Now there's many other heating elements as well. Like I said, there's a heat emitter which doesn't give off any light. There's also heat pads. Just be careful with heat pads though, because if it does get too hot, since there's nothing else in between that and the glass, it may burn your animal. So you do have to be very careful with any heat pads. Also, for any animal, just like how you like warm spots and cool spots, you're able to take off your clothes if you get hot or put clothes on if you're too cold. You always want to make sure your animal has a gradient temperature, and that will vary by species. Your more hotter reptiles will need a more hotter environment, which means their cool side might only touch 75, 80 degrees, while their hot side might touch 120 degrees. While your little less tropical ones may only want to get up to 65, 75, 80 degrees, so they're a little bit cooler. But you still want to have that gradient throughout. You want to have a hotter spot on one side and get generally cooler to the other side. So that might mean 2 heat lights over here, 1 over here, or 1 on this side and none on that side. So you want to make sure they have a good gradient to that. And how you figure that out is in our kind of last station over here, is kind of our accessories and extra items. So you would figure that out by one of these. This is a thermometer and a humidity gauge. You could get one that sits in your enclosure. You could get one that's a target, so it's almost like a little laser that picks up the heat. So that's how you figure out how warm your enclosure is, as well as the humidity. And humidity is the moisture in the air. So in the rainforest, it's high humidity. And if you have a reptile that has a high humidity, like a chameleon or like a poison dart frog or something like that, you need to increase the humidity in there. Best way to do that? Just a little mister. So you can use this, you can use just a water bottle, a spray bottle, anything of the sort, but this is how you increase the humidity. Adding a bigger water dish and misting the environment once, twice, or multiple times a day. You can also have a dripper. This is just an example of a dripper that you can get. You fill this up, it has a little nozzle. You could set it to have a slow drip. That'll give the animal some water, as well as just increasing the humidity throughout the day. So a little dripper. Say if you live a busy lifestyle, you have a lot of things going on, you can't remember if you turn on or turn off lights. This is a daytime, nighttime timer. So you can set if you want it on or off for however many hours you want lights on, however many hours you want lights off. So it's a very nice, handy extra thing for your animal, and it's a little bit easier on you because you could plug both lights in here and have it set. Besides for that, other things to take care of your animals will be supplements. So reptiles should always get a calcium with vitamin D supplement to make sure they improve good bone structure. Birds, probiotics is always good for birds to make sure that their gut flora and their stomachs are well. And snakes, if you have a snake that's having a little hard time shedding, a shed ease or something like this, soaking your animal, soaking your snake, will be able to really kind of help a lot of that off. So these are just a few of the many, many things out there for supplements that you can use. And then you want to make sure your animal is happy as a general whole. And how to make them happy, just like how a lot of you guys like your favorite things, they like their favorite things as well. So enrichment and toys. So here are some bird toys. Birds love to chew. A little wire ball, a little wicker that they can chew and break apart, nuts. Food, I'm motivated by food. A lot of animals are motivated by food. So you can train your animals by food-based things, especially birds. Nuts should not be a main staple of their diet, but a good treat every once in a while. So a treat for them. Reptiles and enrichment. You could redo their enclosure, add different scents to them. You can target train your snakes or lizards to follow a ball and get fed in a certain spot. So a lot of these extra things are just to help and enhance your pet experience at home. So when you do get a pet, always do your research first. A lot of people want to do an impulse buy and get an animal because they're super cool. You see someone else have it. Just make sure you're able to take care of it properly. Unfortunately, a lot of our animals here, just like Zula here, was donated to us because she just got too big for the person at home and got too much to take care of. So Zula was donated to the park a couple years ago. So I always like to promote, especially snakes are really cool, ball pythons are really cool to have at home. But make sure you know, if a snake, you're going to have to feed it mice. If you don't like mice, well then you might want to get another animal. There are a lot of great animals out there that are really easy to take care of, but just make sure you do your full and thorough research on them. So that's kind of what I have for you guys for our little kind of pet expo at home exotic care. I'm going to take any questions that you guys have right now.
Deborah would like to know, for the reptiles, does it make a difference if it's a glass enclosure or screened?
So that's also going to kind of determine on your reptile. If screens will let out a lot of moisture and not really keep a lot of heat in. Glass will help keep that heat in. I know a lot of people will build their own enclosures out of wood because wood can really trap a lot of those things in. So it's going to be really based off of whichever animal you do pick. I know for a fact though that turtles, everyone loves turtles. Turtles are a very messy reptile, surprisingly. They do produce a lot of film and a lot of kind of excess, so a good filter for a turtle is necessary. But turtles also like to test glass. You always see turtles kind of going up against the glass to see, because they're really, really curious animals. So they'll always try to bump up against the glass. So a good kind of recommendation for turtles is having two sides, at least partially kind of papered in on the outside so they can't really see fully through, just to give them almost like a safe area and they don't keep trying to kind of push out. Do you have any others?
No questions?
Yeah, did you have any others from earlier?
No.
Okay. If you guys have put in any questions right now, we still have a little bit of time for questions. But as we're kind of this little bit of interlude here, as always, connect, protect, and change. The biggest thing, especially with snakes, I know if you guys tuned into my Burmese talk with George, George was an invasive species because people kept them as a pet and then released them into the wild. Just make sure, like I said, if you do get a pet, just make sure you do your research, go into it, make sure you get the right one, and you do take proper care of it. Make sure you find out omnivore, herbivore, what they like to eat, their heating and temperature and lighting, because a lot of times that's the biggest issue. Is temperature and heating and humidity is a little thrown off, which makes them not want to eat.
Bella, 9 years old, wants to know, how old is that snake you're holding?
Good question. So she is actually 9 or 10, right, Jan? She's about 9 or 10. And like I said, she's full grown. So if I undo her, she's only about, maybe 3 feet long here. And that's why ball pythons make such a great snake. They can become a finicky eater. That's kind of one of the biggest things. Whenever we hold a ball python, everyone at home, they come in, they go, I have a ball python, it's not eating for me. It's always very hard for some reason to get ball pythons to eat. They go through moods, they go through swings. For some reason, you could do the same thing and they just don't want to eat, which is okay, because snakes can go a few weeks without eating. They're cold-blooded, they don't need to use food as often as we do. So, with that being said though, a ball python is a great snake. A corn snake is also a really good starter snake because they always tend to want to be hungry. So that's kind of what we have here. Guys, continue to put some questions in and we'll do our best to answer them throughout the day. We are going to close off right now of this ZooView. We're going to be starting a new ZooView in about 3 minutes, and that's when Jan and myself are going to kind of go over the biggest news and most exciting news is that we're opening Friday, which is super exciting and great. So just stay tuned, hold on for another 3 minutes. Like I said, this ZooView will end and this live feed will end. We'll go outside since the rain stopped, and we'll start up our next live feed in just a few moments, all right? So thank you guys for coming to our ZooView. I had a great time showing you all of our animals that we had here at the park. I'm really excited that we're actually going to be able to open and share some of the experience with you guys. So stay tuned for the next few minutes for a new Facebook live feed, all right? Thank you guys.